In March 2019, a section of ground in Philadelphia's Fishtown neighborhood shifted 14 inches in 4 hours. It was a localized event, a subsurface drainage failure compounded by a week of sustained rain, and it was not catastrophic in the way that ground failures can be catastrophic. No one was injured, but 4 buildings along the affected block experienced foundation distress, 3 of them in ways that required evacuation. 1 did not. The building that did not was a 9-story mixed-use development at 412 West Burke Street, owned by Vick Associates Development and occupied by 11 commercial tenants on the lower 3 floors. The building's foundation had been designed to withstand exactly this kind of differential ground movement, not because the city code required it at that level of specification, but because the structural engineer who designed it had modeled the subsurface drainage profile of that specific block and had built a contingency into the pile configuration that the city code did not require, that Vick Associates had not known to ask for. The engineer's name appeared nowhere in the post-event reporting. The structural report submitted to the Philadelphia Department of Licenses and Inspections attributed the foundation's performance to robust design standards and quality construction. Vick Associates issued a press release crediting our development team's commitment to building excellence. The engineer's name was Owen. He was 47 years old, a single father, and at the time of the ground failure he was not affiliated with Vick Associates in any capacity. He had been terminated 18 months earlier. He was, at the time of the ground failure, working as a building maintenance supervisor for a commercial property management company in South Philadelphia. He had taken the job because it was there, and because it ended at 4, and because his son needed him home by 4:30. He heard about the ground failure on the radio. He looked up 412 West Burke Streets. He recognized it in the way that structural engineers recognize their own foundations, by the specific geometry of the pile layout, the setback dimensions, the way the building sat on the ground. He did not call anyone. He went back to work. Stay with this, because 4 years later, Harlan Vick's new development project sat on a block 3 streets from that ground failure, and the subsurface drainage report his new team had ordered was using the wrong baseline data. The man who knew why was fixing a leaking pipe in the building's mechanical room. Owen lived in a row house on Mifflin Street in South Philadelphia, in a neighborhood that had been, when he was growing up, primarily Italian-American, and was now primarily a mix of young professionals and longtime families who had stayed. His row house was the middle unit of 3. Brick front, white marble stoop, the kind of house that was identical to its neighbors in everything structural and entirely specific to its occupant in everything else. Owen had bought it 11 years ago and had spent the first 2 years renovating it with the attention of someone who knows what buildings are made of and wants the one he lives in to be made of it correctly. The back bedroom, which was his son's, had been redone in 2018, the summer before everything changed. It had a loft bed that Owen had built himself from plans he had drawn himself, because building the loft bed had given him something useful to do in the first months after the termination, and because his son had been 8 and had wanted a loft bed more than anything. His son's name was Felix. He was 12 now, and had the specific quality of having been raised by someone who explained things completely. Felix understood how buildings worked, how pipes ran, how loads transferred from floor to foundation to soil, because these were the things his father talked about when they were doing things together. Felix had absorbed this the way children absorb the vocabularies of their parents, without noticing that other children don't have those words. He could read a construction drawing. He could not explain how he had learned this. He had simply always been able to do it. Felix was in 7th grade at Furnace High School's middle school program. He kept a list on his phone of every building in Philadelphia that had a story, not famous buildings, not historical sites, but ordinary buildings with specific events. A fire here, a renovation there, a structural incident in 1987 that made the news for 3 days. He had started the list at 10, when Owen had told him about the 2019 ground failure and the building at 412 West Burke Street, and had not told him what the connection to their family was. Owen had been saving that for later. The Ashop Kenard Chetfell was in the main pocket of Owen's work bag, which lived on the hook by the back door. The Setfell was 18 inches of boxwood, slightly worn at the corners, with a brass end cap on each tip and the letters OK, PHL 2009, carved into the face near the 15-inch mark. Owen had carved the letters himself, the week after passing his Pennsylvania structural engineering license exam, with a pocket knife at the kitchen table of the apartment he had been living in at the time. He had been 29. He had gone to work for Vick Associates in 2010, 6 months after getting his license. He had spent 9 years there. He had become, over those 9 years, the structural engineer on 11 projects, mixed-use developments, commercial renovations, 1 hospital expansion. And he had built, in those 9 years, the kind of professional record that produces quiet institutional value. Nothing spectacular, nothing famous, but a body of work that was technically correct and had not, in 9 years, produced a single failure. He had been the only engineer laid off in the restructuring of 2017. He had been 45 years old. Harlan Vick had told him in the meeting that the company was moving toward younger talent and new methodology, and that Owen's contributions had been foundational. He had used that word, but that the path forward required a different profile. Owen had said thank you, and had not said the other things he was thinking, because his son was 8, and the termination package was adequate, and arguing was not what the situation called for. He had been the building maintenance supervisor for Delco Property Group for 4 years now. The work was not what it had been, but it was not nothing. He still read construction drawings. He still understood, when he walked through a building, what was underneath it and what was holding it up. He had submitted 1 report to Delco's ownership about a foundation issue in the Broad Street building that he had identified from the crack pattern in the 3rd floor drywall, and the report had been received and acted on, and the problem had been repaired, and nobody had asked him how he had known what to look for. The referral had come through Delco's contracts manager, a woman named Rita, who handled subcontractor coordination, and who called Owen when she had work that needed someone who could read a building. The referral was to Vick Associates' new development site on North 5th Street, 3 blocks from the 2019 ground failure, for a plumbing repair in the mechanical room of the existing structure on the site, which Vick was converting before breaking ground on the new development. It was a 2-day job. Owen had looked at the address and had said yes. The mechanical room of the existing structure on North 5th Street was in the basement, and it had the specific quality of a basement that had been used continuously for 40 years and maintained at the level of a building whose ownership had been primarily interested in keeping it functional rather than upgrading it. Owen had been in hundreds of rooms like this. He felt at home in them. The plumbing repair was a failed coupling on the main supply line, which had been leaking into the concrete floor for long enough that the concrete had developed a specific discoloration pattern that told Owen, by its shape, that the leak had been slow and continuous for approximately 2 years. While he was in the basement, he noticed the site documentation that the Vick team had staged in the building for the development planning. There was a folding table with a stack of binders. Owen noted the binders without reading them. This was also normal for him. He came back the next morning to complete the secondary repair on a drain line and found that the binder stack had been reduced to 2, with a 3rd lying open on the table. The open binder was the subsurface investigation report for the new development site. He did not read it because it was his job to read it. He read it because it was on the table and it was open, and he had never, in 23 years of structural engineering work, been in a room with a subsurface investigation report without reading it. It was a reflex. He read it standing up, the drain line repair tools on the floor beside him. The report was for the new development site, an 11-story mixed-use building that would replace the existing structure he was currently in, 3 blocks north and 2 blocks east of the 2019 ground failure. The report was thorough and competent. It described the subsurface conditions accurately. It noted the drainage profile, the soil classification, the bearing capacity at various depths. It was also using a baseline drainage model that predated the 2019 ground failure. Owen set the report down. He picked it up again. He checked the data sources in the appendix. He found what he had suspected. The drainage baseline was from a 2016 survey, the most recent available in the city's geotechnical database for that specific block. The 2016 survey was accurate for 2016. After the 2019 failure, the drainage profile of the entire neighborhood had been altered in ways that made the 2016 data materially incorrect for current construction planning. He knew this because he had modeled it. In 2019, in the month after the failure event, because he had been the engineer who designed 412 West Burke Street, and he had needed to understand what had happened, and why his foundation had survived, and the others hadn't, and in the process of understanding that he had documented the post-failure drainage redistribution in a technical analysis that he had written for his own records, and that was, as far as he knew, the most accurate subsurface drainage model for that specific neighborhood currently in existence. He finished the drain line repair. He repacked his tools. He took a photograph of the report's title page and the data source appendix with his phone. He called his brother Raymond that afternoon, not from the site, but from the car parked 2 blocks away, because he was thinking about what to do, and he needed someone who would ask him the right questions. While he was in the basement, he noticed the site documentation that the Vick team had staged in the building for the development planning. There was a folding table with a stack of binders. Owen noted the binders without reading them. This was also normal for him. He came back the next morning to complete the secondary repair on a drain line and found that the binder stack had been reduced to 2, with a third lying open on the table. The open binder was the subsurface investigation report for the new development site. He did not read it because it was his job to read it. He read it because it was on the table, and it was open, and he had never, in 23 years of structural engineering work, been in a room with a subsurface investigation report without reading it. It was a reflex. He read it standing up, the drain line repair tools on the floor beside him. The report was for the new development site, an 11-story mixed-use building that would replace the existing structure he was currently in, 3 blocks north and 2 blocks east of the 2019 ground failure. The report was thorough and competent. It described the subsurface conditions accurately. It noted the drainage profile, the soil classification, the bearing capacity at various depths. It was also using a baseline drainage model that predated the 2019 ground failure. Owen set the report down. He picked it up again. He checked the data sources in the appendix. He found what he had suspected. The drainage baseline was from a 2016 survey, the most recent available in the city's geotechnical database for that specific block. The 2016 survey was accurate for 2016. After the 2019 failure, the drainage profile of the entire neighborhood had been altered in ways that made the 2016 data materially incorrect for current construction planning. He knew this because he had modeled it. In 2019, in the month after the failure event, because he had been the engineer who designed 412 West Burke Street, and he had needed to understand what had happened, and why his foundation had survived, and the others hadn't, and in the process of understanding that he had documented the post-failure drainage redistribution in a technical analysis that he had written for his own records, and that was, as far as he knew, the most accurate subsurface drainage model for that specific neighborhood currently in existence. He finished the drain line repair. He repacked his tools. He took a photograph of the report's title page and the data source appendix with his phone. He called his brother Raymond that afternoon, not from the site, but from the car parked 2 blocks away, because he was thinking about what to do, and he needed someone who would ask him the right questions. The report was thorough and competent. It described the subsurface conditions accurately. It noted the drainage profile, the soil classification, the bearing capacity at various depths. It was also using a baseline drainage model that predated the 2019 ground failure. Owen set the report down. He picked it up again. He checked the data sources in the appendix. He found what he had suspected. The drainage baseline was from a 2016 survey, the most recent available in the city's geotechnical database for that specific block. The 2016 survey was accurate for 2016. After the 2019 failure, the drainage profile of the entire neighborhood had been altered in ways that made the 2016 data materially incorrect for current construction planning. He knew this because he had modeled it. In 2019, in the month after the failure event, because he had been the engineer who designed 412 West Burke Street, and he had needed to understand what had happened, and why his foundation had survived, and the others hadn't, and in the process of understanding that he had documented the post-failure drainage redistribution in a technical analysis that he had written for his own records, and that was, as far as he knew, the most accurate subsurface drainage model for that specific neighborhood currently in existence. He finished the drain line repair. He repacked his tools. He took a photograph of the report's title page and the data source appendix with his phone. He called his brother that afternoon. "The report is wrong," Owen said. "How wrong?" Raymond said. Wrong enough that the foundation design for an 11-story building will be based on drainage data that doesn't represent what's actually down there. And if the foundation design is wrong, the building might be fine, Owen said. Probably it would be fine, under specific conditions. Like the 2019 event, Raymond said. The 2019 event was a 1 in 40-year scenario, Owen said. It doesn't make the building unsafe in normal conditions. It means the building would have a higher than specified risk profile under a particular stress scenario that the foundation, if designed to the 2016 data, would not be optimized to handle. Raymond said, "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to know if I have an obligation to say something," Owen said. "And if so, to whom? And in what capacity?" "I'm a plumber on this site," Raymond said. "You're not a plumber. I'm functioning as one," Owen said. "You have a Pennsylvania structural engineering license," Raymond said. "Does that license carry professional obligations that apply regardless of your current employment function?" Owen was quiet. "Yes," he said. "It does." He spent the evening looking at his 2019 analysis. He had kept it on a hard drive that lived in the bottom drawer of the desk in the 3rd bedroom, which was also the room where he had put the framed copy of his Pennsylvania structural engineering license that he had moved from his office wall when the office became the 3rd bedroom and had never rehung, because hanging it on the wall of a room that was now primarily storage had seemed, in the first months, like an act of optimism he wasn't ready for. He had hung it last year. Felix had asked why it was leaning against the wall, and Owen had said it belonged on the wall. And Felix had found a hammer and a nail and hung it himself, which Owen had found both practically and emotionally complete. The 2019 analysis was 31 pages. He had written it over 4 weeks in late 2019, working at the kitchen table after Felix was asleep, pulling the subsurface data from the city's engineer archive, and running the drainage redistribution calculations with software he had downloaded to his personal laptop because he no longer had access to the firm's tools. The work had been detailed and specific and had, in the 4 years since, been added to by nothing because there had been no occasion to add to it. It simply existed in the bottom drawer of the desk in the 3rd bedroom, accurate and unread. He read it now. It was good. The methodology was sound. The calculations were correctly performed, and the conclusion that the 2019 drainage redistribution had materially altered the subsurface drainage profile for approximately 6 blocks surrounding the failure site, including the North 5th Street block where Vick's new development was planned, was supported by the data. It was simply wrong about what was under the ground. Owen closed the analysis, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. The question Raymond had asked, "Does your license carry professional obligations that apply regardless of your current employment function?" was not actually a question whose answer he didn't know. He had been licensed for 18 years. He knew the Pennsylvania Engineers Code of Professional Conduct. He thought about Felix's list of buildings with stories and the fact that Felix did not yet know that the building at 412 West Burke Street was on his father's list too, for different reasons. He thought about the 11-story building that Harlan Vick was planning to put on North 5th Street and the approximately 200 people who would eventually occupy it. He reformatted the analysis. He applied his professional seal. He wrote a 2-page cover letter explaining the basis for the submission. He filed it with the Department of Licenses and Inspections at 9:47 the following morning, through the department's online submission portal from the same kitchen table where he had written the analysis 4 years earlier. Then he drove to the North 5th Street site and fixed the secondary drain line. The submission went to a plan examiner named Theodora Voss, who had been with the Department of Licenses and Inspections for 11 years and who had developed a specific reading of technical submissions. She could tell, within 2 pages, whether a document had been produced by someone who understood what they were talking about, or by someone who had assembled language that sounded like understanding. Owen's submission was in the first category. She read the 2-page cover letter twice, then went to the 31-page analysis. She called Owen 3 days after the submission. "Mr. Kraft," she said, "I've read your submission. I have some questions." "Of course," he said. He was on his lunch break, in his car, on the phone. "Your 2019 analysis," she said. "The drainage redistribution modeling. Did you have access to subsurface instrumentation data, or was this based on secondary inference from surface observations and the existing boring logs?" He explained. He had used the city's archived boring logs, combined with drainage flow rate data from the city's stormwater management records, combined with a subsurface drainage model he had developed from first principles. The model had been validated against the actual failure geometry. "That's a specific methodology," she said. "It's used in geotechnical post-event analysis. It's not common in consulting practice. I learned it in a graduate seminar at Drexel," he said. "Mr. Kraft," she said, "can I ask what your current role is?" "Building maintenance supervisor," he said. "South Philadelphia." She was quiet again. "And before that," he told her. "Structural engineer, Vick Associates, 14 years. His license number, his project history." He told her about the foundation at 412 West Burke Street, that he had designed it, that the post-event analysis he was submitting had been produced because he needed to understand why that foundation had performed the way it had. There was a silence. "You designed the 412 West Burke's foundation," she said. "Yes," he said. She said, "Hold on." He heard her typing. She said, "The post-event report lists the foundation's performance under design excellence, consistent with Vick and Associates development standards." "Yes," he said. "Your name isn't in it." "No," he said, "it's not." She said, "How long ago did Vick terminate you?" "6 years," he said. "I was 45. A silence that had a specific texture to it. "Mr. Kraft," she said, "I'm going to need you to come in." He came in on a Thursday morning. Theodora spread 3 documents on the desk between them. The first was Owen's 2019 analysis, the reformatted version, with his professional seal. The second was the post-event report from the 2019 ground failure. The third was the current site investigation report for the Vick development on North 5th Street, the one with the 2016 drainage baseline. "I want to show you something," she said. She pointed to a specific passage in the post-event report, noting that the failure event had likely altered local drainage patterns, but that quantitative assessment of the redistribution extent would require additional subsurface investigation. She pointed to the same section in Owen's 2019 analysis. His analysis had performed exactly that quantitative assessment, 6 weeks after the event. "No quantitative assessment has been officially produced," Owen said, "because the one that was produced by me, on my own time, on my own equipment, 4 years ago, and I submitted it to the department last week." Theodora looked at him. "Mr. Kraft," she said, "do you understand what you've submitted?" "A geotechnical analysis," he said. "You've submitted the missing analysis," she said. "The analysis the post-event report said was needed, and that the current development report was unable to cite. You've submitted it with your professional seal, 4 years after you produced it, from a position as a building maintenance supervisor, for a development project by the company that terminated you 6 years ago." "Mr. Kraft," she said, "one more question. The analysis you submitted, you produced it 4 years ago and kept it. What made you submit it now?" He thought about this. "I saw the site report," he said, "and I recognized the problem. And I have a professional obligation." He paused. "And I've had this analysis for 4 years. It's correct. It should be somewhere other than my laptop." She looked at him for a moment. "It's going to be somewhere other than your laptop," she said. The Structural Review Division assigned the case to a senior plan examiner named Marcus Greer, who had been with the department for 16 years. He reviewed Owen's analysis over 10 days. He pulled the primary data sources and ran his own calculations using Owen's model as a template. His calculations produced results within 3% of Owen's. On the 11th day, he called Theodora. "The analysis is correct," he said. "The methodology is sound. The data sources are appropriate. The conclusions are supported. And the implication for the North 5th Street site? The bearing soil drainage saturation risk at 12 to 18 feet is underestimated in the current report by 18 to 24%, Theodora said. The post-event report said a quantitative drainage assessment was needed. That was in 2019. Why didn't the department commission one? Marcus was quiet. "It's in the record," he said. The post-event report recommendation was referred to the Geotechnical Database Working Group in June 2019. The working group met 3 times between 2019 and 2021 and did not produce an updated drainage baseline. The item was carried over in the working group's agenda for 2 years and was ultimately archived in 2021 when the working group was reorganized. "It was archived," Theodora said. "The recommendation was archived," Marcus said, "not acted on." What Marcus pulled, over the following week was a record of institutional inaction that was specific enough to be uncomfortable and general enough to be deniable. The working group had met. The agenda item had been carried. The item had been archived. The rationale given was superseded by updated citywide geotechnical database standards, a rationale that was technically accurate since the city had updated its general standards in 2020, but that had not specifically addressed the drainage redistribution question from the 2019 event. The updated standards had been developed in consultation with several geotechnical consulting firms. One of them was the firm that Cliff Bauer had joined in November 2021. Cliff Bauer had chaired the working group between 2019 and 2021. Theodora presented this to the department's chief engineer on a Friday afternoon. The chief engineer read Marcus's technical assessment and the working group archive summary without speaking. When he finished, he looked at Theodora. "The analysis is correct," he said. "Independently verified by Marcus Greer," she said. "Results within 3%. He was quiet for a moment. "I want the permit review to proceed through normal channels," he said, "with Marcus's assessment attached. I want the applicant notified of the technical finding. And then, the applicant notification. It's going to name Owen Kraft as the source of the analysis." "It is," the chief engineer said. "He's currently working on their site as a temporary plumber." A pause. "I'm aware," he said. "Notify the applicant." The notification went to Vick Associates' project manager, Sandra Lim, who read it on a Tuesday morning and then walked down the hall to Harlan Vick's office. Harlan read the notification that Sandra placed on his desk and said nothing for a long time. The notification stated that the department had received a technical submission challenging the geotechnical baseline. The submission had been independently verified. The submission had been filed by Owen Kraft, P.E., license number PA 44891. Harlan said, "Owen Kraft." Sandra said, "He's been on site. The plumbing work." Harlan was quiet. "He's been on our site," he said. Harlan read the submission again. He read Owen's name and his license number. He read the date of the analysis, October 2019, and he did the arithmetic. Owen had been terminated in 2017. The analysis had been produced in 2019. Owen had been out of the company for 2 years when he produced a geotechnical analysis for a site 3 blocks from a project whose foundation Owen had designed, which had survived the 2019 ground failure, which had been cited in a city report as an example of best practice foundation performance, and which had been credited to Vick Associates development standards without Owen's name. He called his attorney. The attorney said, "Harlan, this is real. The analysis is verified. You need to revise the foundation design," Harlan said. "What does the revision cost?" The attorney said, "That's the wrong question right now." Harlan sat in his office for a while after the call. He looked at the framed photographs on his wall. The 46 completed projects, each with a small brass plate identifying the location and year. He found 412 West Burke Street. It was a photograph of the completed building, 9 stories, brick facade, the Fishtown streetscape behind it. The brass plate said Vick Associates, 2012. There was no other name on it. He called Sandra back. He said, "Get me Kraft's contact information." Sandra said, "He's on site today." The final plumbing inspection. Harlan was quiet. "I'll go to the site," he said. Owen was in the basement when Harlan arrived. Not the mechanical room, the boiler room, adjacent, where the drain line he had repaired connected to the building's main drainage stack. He was doing the final inspection of the repair work, which was what you did when you finished a job. You checked it, confirmed it was right, and signed off. He heard footsteps on the stairs and turned. Harlan looked to Owen, like a man who had spent 30 years being right about things and had arrived at a situation where that was not the relevant qualification. "Mr. Kraft," he said. "Mr. Vick," Owen said. A silence. "The North 5th Street submission," Harlan said. "Yes," Owen said. "You produced that analysis in 2019. "Yes, when you were not employed by us." "When I was not employed by anyone in a structural engineering capacity," Owen said. "I produced it for my own records, to understand what had happened to the 412 West Burke's Foundation." "The 412 West Burke's Foundation," Harlan said. "Which you designed." "Yes," Owen said. Harlan looked at the boiler room around them. He looked at the drain line repair. He looked at the man standing in front of him in work clothes, with a Delco Property Group logo on his jacket, and a canvas bag at his feet, with a seatbelt visible in the top pocket. "We terminated you in 2017, Harlan said. "Yes," Owen said. "You were 45. "Yes." "Generational restructuring," Harlan said. The words had the specific weight of a phrase being heard in a different context than the one in which it was produced. "You were the only structural engineer let go in that round." "Yes," Owen said. "The 412 West Berks Foundation," he said. "Our post-event press release. It credited the company." "Yes," Owen said. "Your name was not in it." "No," Owen said. Another silence. The boiler room was dim and functional and did not care about any of this. The drain line Owen had repaired was working correctly. The building above them was holding up. These things were simply true. "What do you want?" Harlan said. Not aggressively. The question of a man who had arrived at the end of a long sequence of decisions and was trying to understand what came after.
"I want the foundation to be right," Owen said. "The North 5th Street Foundation. I want the design to be revised using the correct drainage data. That's the first thing."
"The department is requiring that anyway," Harlan said.
"I know," Owen said. "I'm telling you it's what I want, not as a negotiating position, as a statement of what matters to me."
Harlan looked at him. "And the second thing, attribution," Owen said. "Not retroactively, not publicly, but going forward."
"I want the 412 West Berks Foundation to be correctly attributed in any documentation the company produces that references it. And I want the post-event credit, whatever form that takes, to accurately reflect who designed the foundation that performed."
Harlan was quiet for a long time. "The North 5th Street design revision," he said. "We'll need an engineer who understands the corrected drainage model." "Yes," Owen said. "You produced the corrected drainage model," Harlan said. "Yes," Owen said. "Are you available to consult on the foundation revision?" Harlan said, formally. As a licensed structural engineer, Owen considered this. He thought about the license on the wall of the third bedroom. He thought about the seatbelt in the bag. He thought about Felix, and the list of buildings with stories, and the building at 412 West Berks Street, that Felix didn't know yet, was on his father's list. "I'm available," he said. The meeting with the department happened 2 weeks later, in the permit review conference room on the 3rd floor of the Arch Street building. Present were Theodora Voss, Marcus Greer, Dr. James Okafor, and Owen. Also present at the department's invitation was Harlan Vick and Sandra Lim. Harlan's presence had not been required. It had been requested, and he had come, which Theodora had noted as a data point. People who had done something that required defending did not always come to meetings they were not required to attend. Marcus walked through the technical findings precisely and without editorializing. Owen answered questions the way he answered everything, precisely, completely, and without embellishment. Harlan Vick watched this from his chair. At the end of the technical presentation, Dr. Okafor turned to Harlan. "Mr. Vick," he said, "the foundation design for 412 West Berks Streets. Your firm's documentation has credited the company for the foundation's performance without attributing the design to an individual engineer." "That's correct," Harlan said. He said it without inflection. It was not a defense, it was an acknowledgement. "Going forward," Dr. Okafor said, "the department will be requiring that structural engineering attributions in permit applications accurately identify the licensed engineer of record. But I want to make clear that the 412 West Berks Foundation is, for the purposes of the department's records, attributed to Owen Kraft, P.E.